Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome once again to our online Millennium MAMS Forum. Dr. Dalwai, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. And before we begin, I would like to introduce and acknowledge our mentor, Mr. Dhanuka, because he has been the solution provider to financial independence for women. Our organization, Millennium MAMS, completes 28 years of empowering women through financial literacy. And we study capital markets, the economy, the macroeconomy, and investments in companies and sectors that will be the growth drivers for India. And what we believe, and we are really bullish on, I can say, agriculture is on our radar, and we have great expectations from it. Now, I would like to introduce to all of us who are present here today, our guest of honor, Mr. Ashok Dalwai. He's an IAS officer, an agricultural economist, and a doctorate in economics. He's had numerous important portfolios like Development Administration, Commissioner of Bangalore, Secretary of the Commerce and Industries Department, Government of Karnataka, Principal Secretary, Industries Department, Principal Secretary, Steels and Mines, Orissa, and Deputy Director, UIDAI. He's currently the Chairman and CEO of Doubling Farmers Income Committee and is taking measures to double farm income by 2022-23. You all will be happy to know that Dr. Dalwai is on track regarding this goal. Today's session, and I'm sure about it, will enlighten us regarding the road ahead in doubling of farmers' income, the challenges of taking agricultural productivity, and of course, restarting the India growth story. So let's have a huge round of applause for Dr. Dalwai. And Doctor, I would like to introduce you to my colleague, Sirisha.
Okay.
Yeah, she will be conducting the Q&A for us today. Okay. Sirisha, would you like to say hi? Yeah.
Yes. Hi, Sirisha. Yeah.
It's a pleasure, sir.
Good evening to you.
And after your address, then I will be handing over to Sirisha for Q&A.
Okay, all right. Thank you. So should we start now?
Sure, yes.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Rachna. And thank you also to all your colleagues here. I am very happy to see all of you. And I'm pretty impressed to see that two gentlemen have seen the vision for the women of our country. And I must recognize the presence of Mr. Vishnu Dhanuka and the second visionary, Mr. Sanjay, not there, but I recognize his presence also. So I must pay my regards to both of you, gentlemen, that you are envisioning to empower the women of our country by making them independent financially. That's very important. And I also see a goal when I read from the note that Rachna shared with me, that you would like to empower the women by making them investors in the stock market. And one thing I was very impressed to see that your dream follower, is none other than Warren Buffett. He's not a speculator. Warren Buffett is a speculator. There are many people who invest in stock markets for the purpose of speculation, but here you have some ideal who is talking about the true interests of the stock market. So you have Warren Buffett as your ideal. I'm impressed. And I understand that all of you are gathered from different parts of the country, are investors, and you are also entrepreneurs. And you are interested in tapping the potential that exists in the different domains of our economy to create jobs, make yourselves independent, and make others independent. And that's the goal of the country today. In a demographically dense country like India, where gainful employment and incomes associated with that are the two major objectives. We require people who can create jobs. We require people who can be entrepreneurs and not job seekers, as everybody keeps saying. Before I go into analyzing what is enterprise and how agriculture sector can be a field for enterprise, I must thank you for inviting me to be with you this evening. And I can see a long list of illustrious speakers that you have been able to invite over the last 2 months of COVID period. You have had such great people like Indra Nooyi, who is an ideal by herself. You have had another great thinker and practical experienced man, Honorable Minister Gadkari, who has lots of bright ideas with him. And I was equally impressed when I heard that you people brought none other than the authors of Ikigai. That is now the bestseller. Everybody is reading Ikigai in the world over. And you were able to touch base with Albert and Hector Garcia and get them to speak to you. Fantastic. So you are focused not just on pure business, but also on the sociological, the psychological dimensions of the human being, and more particularly the women. And to be an entrepreneur, you require all that. When you look at the classical definitions of enterprise and entrepreneur, we'll see that an entrepreneur has been defined in terms of economics, in terms of sociology, in terms of psychology, and of course, a multiple combinations of these different factors. But to understand simply, an entrepreneur is somebody who undertakes. You are undertaking. What are you undertaking? You are undertaking to buy a cafeteria of factors of production like land, labor, capital, etc., and convert them intelligently into products that can be sold in the market. And as you convert these factors of production into products that can be sold, naturally there's an element of risk that is involved. So one important feature that distinguishes an entrepreneur from anybody else is his ability to take the risk. However, we must all remember that the risk has to be taken based on the principles of planning and the probability of success. If we do not look at these two elements, planning and the probability of success, then it will amount to speculation. We don't need speculators. We need people who can plan. And an entrepreneur, therefore, is somebody who can organize, who can manage, and then sustain that in terms of both production and post-production. So I must congratulate all of you that you are entrepreneurs. You are trying to create more entrepreneurs among the women folk of our country. And the younger generation of today is much more gung-ho about being an entrepreneur. So let us move forward. And then I will talk to you briefly about how agriculture sector is a green field for promoting enterprise. And thereafter we can go into question and answer sessions. Now let me first tell you that yes, you wanted to know about doubling farmers' income. Now I will tell you very briefly why this is. Doubling farmers' income is only a quantitative target that the Honorable Prime Minister has set for the country. It's a vision that by 2022, when India celebrates her 150th year of independence, Mahatma Gandhi's birth anniversary, and India celebrates her 75th year of independence, we would like to see that the farmers who constitute the majority section of our country are economically independent. Their welfare is taken care of. All of you agree that Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our nation, had one dream, one vision. He said that I would like to see an India where the tear on every face of the Indian is wiped out. So in 1947, when we got independence, we got political independence. And he said, now the fight for economic independence has begun. Now the vision of the Honorable Prime Minister is to fulfill that particular dream of Mahatma Gandhi as we celebrate 150th of his birthday in 2022. Now, farmers, unfortunately, who are entrepreneurs, you'll all agree that the farmers are the first entrepreneurs that the civilization has seen. When agriculture began 10,000 years ago as a settled activity, it was these farmers who took the risk of going into the forests and finding what species can be grown. They were the first entrepreneurs who took the risk of seeing what animals can be domesticated. They were the first entrepreneurs who saw what kind of implements can be made out of stone and other kinds of material. Just imagine, they were entrepreneurs. For 10,000 years, this entrepreneurial class of farmers has sustained our economy. Unfortunately, in modern world, this particular entrepreneurial class is the weakest in terms of incomes. In 2015-16, the average income of a farm household was rupees 96,000 per annum. That means around 1,000 per month. Just come to think of it, we have got 120 million farmers in this country, 12 crore farmers. 120 million farmers were at an average earning about 8,000 rupees per month only goes to show how poor they are or how poor the country is. Therefore, the vision of doubling their income by 2022 within a period of 6 to 7 years was a laudable objective. Now, how do we do that? The only way to do is that we convert agriculture into agribusiness. When you say agriculture, normally everybody looks at it in terms of production. That I go and sow my seeds, I plant my seedlings or saplings, I let it grow, harvest it, consume it. But let's remember that it was okay as long as we wanted to consume everything at home. That means when 80% of our people, for example, at the time of independence were all farmers, they grew what they wanted to, they ate and stayed at home. But today that can't be the story. Today, when more and more people go out of agriculture, and those who remain in agriculture would also like to go beyond eating. They would like to clothe themselves well, they would like to treat themselves well if they get sick, they would like to go and see places, they would like to educate the children. They also want to undertake Kashi Yatra, for example, or a visit to Mecca and Medina. How do they do all these things? If they need to do all these things, they will certainly need money more than required just to eat. Hence, when we convert agriculture to agribusiness, we are saying we would like to generate enough incomes for the farmers from agriculture such that they are able to meet all their biological requirements and also social and cultural requirements and further save the money. Saving, as you will understand, is very important. Saving enables you to meet contingent requirements. For example, COVID situation we saw millions of people migrating from large cities back to the villages. What did it show? It only showed that our people didn't have enough savings and therefore were not able to keep their body and soul together under difficult circumstances. So when we convert agriculture to agribusiness, we have to ensure that our farmers are also able to save enough money to meet their contingencies first. Second, they should have enough surplus money so that they can plow it back into agriculture in terms of new technology, new capital investment for agriculture infrastructure, so that the business keeps growing. In any business, for example, you are always trying to increase your volumes so that volume is converted into higher value. So likewise, agribusiness must help the farmers to continuously increase their volume of production and simultaneously convert that into value. So when we want to make an agribusiness, the basic principle is what is called creating agri-value chains. An agriculture value chain, or what is more commonly called as a supply chain. There's a little difference I would like you to understand as an entrepreneur. There's a difference between an agriculture value chain or any value chain for that matter, even in industry and service sector. There's a difference between a value chain and a supply chain. A value chain, let me give the simplest example. For example, I am a farmer I grew paddy in my field. Those seeds I stored for myself, and for the next year, I sold them to my neighbors. My neighbors now got the seeds from me. This was the simplest value chain. I produced paddy, I sold them to my neighbors or villagers. That is the shortest of value chain. But now tell me, if I produce so many seeds that all my villagers are not able to consume, I want to sell it in the next village, I carry it by a truck or a small tempo and sell it in my neighboring village. Now here, one value chain has got added with another value chain. As a farmer, I may not be able to afford a tempo, but somebody else says, I have a tempo, I can help you to transport, but you pay me money for transportation. Imagine there are two value chains now. One value chain of production, another value chain of transportation. So these two value chains now become a supply chain. So this way you can keep on adding vertically a series of value chains and build what is called a long supply chain. And why do you require a supply chain? In India today, the farmers have begun to produce so much that they cannot consume everything that they produce in their own homes. They cannot consume in their own village. Neither they can be used in their own district. For example, we grew only 50 million tons of food grains in 1951. Today, we are producing 291 million tons. Our agriculture produced today is 1.3 billion tons. That means 1,300 million tons, much more than what we require. In that case, if we are not able to sell all that our farmers produce, that becomes waste. It becomes waste because first it gets wasted. Second, you are putting money to produce that and you're not getting value for that. It's a waste. Hence, what we now need is to find new markets. I have to find a market outside my village, outside my taluk, outside my district, outside my state, outside my country. That means I need to go into the export market. So if I want to connect from my village to a district place, to a state headquarter, to a national capital or anywhere else and beyond, I need a strong supply chain management. I as a farmer, for example, I cannot manage all these things. So there'll be a series of value chain providers, entrepreneurs who come and say, all right, I build this supply chain. Now, mind you, if we want to build this long supply chain, we also need certain support systems. What is that? If I suppose produce mango and I want to sell my mango in one interior place of 24 Paraganas in Bangalore, how does mango travel from 24 Paraganas to Bangalore? Because mango is a live product. Mango is not a dead product. That is the difference between agriculture and all other products. A car, for example, is a dead product, is a dead commodity. But an agriculture produces a living organism. Even after we have harvested that, it continues to live, it continues to breathe. The only thing is the lifespan varies from one commodity to another. For example, milk, it can live for 4 hours. After 4 hours, it gets dead. That means it gets spoiled if you don't pasteurize it. A paddy, for example, can stay without any problem for 1 year, 2 years. A pulse, for example, can stay for about 8 months without compromise. A fruit can stay for a few hours or a few days. Hence, we have to ensure that the mango that is to be sold in Bangalore from 24 Paraganas is carried in a manner that the quality does not suffer. And that's called as reefer van. A reefer van is a cold storage vehicle that can carry the mango in a safe and secure manner and sell it to the consumers in Bangalore. So this is called an agri-logistics. So if we want a strong supply chain management, what we need is very robust storage systems, very robust transportation systems. When you talk of storage, it's not just a godown. It can be a cold store, it can be a pack house. There are different kinds of stores required for different kinds of commodities. For example, for milk, you require a different kind of a store. You require a bulk cooler, for example, or you require a cooler with different temperature for different kinds of products. A short point is that we want to convert agriculture to agribusiness. Agribusiness requires value chains, and value chains must integrate into supply chains. And supply chain will require a robust agri-logistics. And then it also requires what is called alternate marketing channels. So what now Government of India is doing under this particular Atmanirbhar Bharat that we all heard about is to bring about reforms in our policies, simultaneously invest huge amount of money in agri-logistics. Both are required. Now, what are those reforms? The reforms is that first, before I tell you about that, let me tell you briefly that how do we ensure that people make profits? I'll give you simple variables. Like in any business, whether it is a manufacturing sector or a service sector, agriculture, as I told you, is an enterprise. It has basically three variables. If we want to make profit, you must look at three variables. The first variable is how do we help the farmer to produce more from the same unit of land? That means if I am creating 10 quintals of, let's say, ragi or 10 quintals of bajra or 10 quintals of wheat, how do I make it 15 quintals from the same 1 acre of land? If I'm now, for example, producing 2 tons of fish from my pond, how do I make it 3 tons from the same unit of fish pond? That's the basic thing. So obviously what it means is increase the volume of produce. That's the first variable. Second variable is I produce this at lower cost of production. That means how do I use new technology, efficiently manage my factors of production in such a way that my yield has increased, but my cost of production has not increased. The third one is how do I convert my volumes into money? That means how do the farmers get remunerative prices on their produce? So these are the three basic principles, and this is what it is in car manufacturing, in jewelry making, anywhere you go, the same three things, right? So agriculture is also looking at improving the production through better technology, do it at a lower cost of production, and third, give him good prices. So what happens is now his profits become higher, his savings become higher, and therefore his income grow up. So we are now looking in agriculture to this particular thing. Now we realize in our country that technology of production is not a problem. In fact, India's productivity has been going up continuously. Let me take the case of last 6 years. In the year 2014, India produced 264 million tons of food grains. Food grains means all cereals and pulses. And now the 264 in 2019-20 has become 291 million tons. Just come to think of it. Fruits and vegetables. We grew 264 million tons in 2014. Now it has become 315 million tons. Okay. Milk. We produced 151 million tons in 2014. Today it has become 176 million tons. Just imagine. And apart from this, we have got medicinal plants, herbal plants. We have got plantations like coffee, tea, rubber, cocoa, and so on. And then we have got fish. 13 million tons of fish is produced in the country. We got meat. 7 million tons of meat is produced in the country. We got aquaculture. Huge quantum of that is produced. So there's a diversity of all this produced. So the challenge now is, if the farmers are producing enough, why are they still poor? That's the question. So the answer lay in bringing an environment, creating an environment where they can get better prices on this produce. And hence the need for value chain or a supply chain. Because I don't have demand where I produce, I need to sell where there's a demand. Okay, I need to transport them. So the government is therefore focusing on post-production. In post-production, if we want more money to go to the farmers, there is one thing: improve your markets. Okay, let me assume that we have a good markets today. But just because we have a good market, that does not mean that the farmers will benefit. I'm telling you all these things so that you can find avenues for enterprise. Let's assume that now a farmer in 24 Parganas, in one remote village, is able to cross his island by a boat and touch Kolkata to sell his fish. But unfortunately, yes, there's a good market for fish in Kolkata, But if the farmer is not able to reach that place, how does he benefit from that rate? So he requires a facility. Hence, income is a factor of two. One is what is the total volume that a farmer can sell and at what rate can he sell. Suppose I produce 10 quintals of paddy. I'm not able to sell 10 quintals, but I'm able to sell only 2 quintals. 8 quintals is gone waste. I have sold 2 quintals at very high price. Still, I don't get profit. Whereas another farmer is able to sell 10 quintals at a lower rate somewhere, he is getting more profit than me. Hence, the secret to make the farmers benefit is help them to sell everything that they produce and at good rate. Okay, so therefore, in the post-harvest management today, we're focusing on two things: to improve the markets, and second, to create infrastructure, that is storage, transportation, and all processing facilities. Okay, so that is the whole purpose of our Atmanirbhar Bharat. Okay, so now I would also like to share with you another aspect where you can find scope for enterprise. Now, I spoke to you simply about the basic production system that, I produce meat, milk, fish, jawar, paddy, cotton, sugarcane, and so on, and convert that into value, right? Either by selling somewhere or by converting into sugarcane into sugar, cotton to a textile, something like that. But with all that, I think before I forget, let me also tell you the importance of agri-logistics. That in our country, because of the absence of the infrastructure, there is a huge quantity of food waste. And that food loss is of the order of rupees 1 lakh crore. This is a very conservative figure I'm telling you. That means, say today, for example, agriculture value is about 11 lakh crore. The total value of the agriculture produced in our country is approximately 11 lakh to 12 lakh crore. Out of this, 1 lakh crore worth of agriculture produced is wasted only because we are not able to reach the market. And if we are able to strengthen our agri infrastructure, storage and transportation processing, we'll be able to save that. And that money goes into the pockets of the farmers. That's the importance of food loss. And since a lot of your women, you are more concerned about food saving, let me distinguish between two terminologies. One is food waste, one is food loss. In our country, both things happen. Food loss means is a technological problem. Because I don't have storage and transportation, my food is not reaching the market and there's a wastage. That's a food loss. And that happens in every country in the world. But food waste is an ethical problem. We pick up the plate, we take more than what we eat half of it and waste, throw the rest. That is a food wastage. We need to reduce food wastage and food loss. Very interestingly, food loss is more in Africa and India and other Asian countries where technology is poor. It is much less in America, Europe, etc. But the other way around, food wastage is more in USA and less in India. That means here we have got greater value. We respect the food in our country. And we must inculcate this particular ethical value in our children also. That's what I want to drive home the point. Ultimately, food is a god or goddess that we treat. So we must ensure that both food loss and food wastage do not happen. All right. So I leave it at that particular point. I was trying to tell you that if we focus on this, yes, we'll help the farmers. It's good for the farmers. Simultaneously, it's good for the consumers because consumers will get better quality of food, more nutritious food from the farming system. Today, what is happening is that in India, we are food secure, but we are not nutrition secure. Why? What I would like to tell you is that as per the ICMR prescription, Indian Council of Medical Research, and also by the experts from nutritional domain, they all tell us that there are 6 nutrients that a human being requires. They are broadly categorized macronutrient and micronutrient. Under the macronutrient, we have got the carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Under the micronutrient, we have got the minerals, vitamins, and the essential amino acids. Now, unfortunately, we have been producing more and more of carbohydrates, paddy, wheat, jawar, maize. They are giving us more of carbohydrates, and we are selling that carbohydrate to our people. But we need to give them proteins, we need to give them fats, minerals, vitamins. So we need to produce more of those commodities. When we produce more of those commodities like fruits and vegetables and milk and meat and fish, for example, pulses, for example, for the vegetarians, the people get nutrition and farmers get better rate because there's more money by selling fruits, there's more money by selling fish, there's more money by selling pulses than simply a cereal.
Sir, can I come in? Sorry to button, but can I come in here with a question, sir?
Yes, please.
No, you were just talking about this, the production part. Isn't farmer education, land holding, all this also add to what you are saying? Because there is a, ununiformity in the kind of production. So.
Yeah. No, yes, see, agriculture, I mean, there are many issues. I was not going into those parts, okay? I was trying to focus on how we can think of generating enterprise from agriculture, but I do agree with you.
Continue, sir. Sorry to button, I'll put it in the question.
I'll answer that also of yours. I agree with you that yes, the size of the farm does matter. In our country, we have got 141 million hectares of land. Of that, 86% belongs to small and marginal farmers. That means our entire 141 million hectares. Let me also tell you, this is the second highest extent of land anywhere in the world. The only country that has got more land than us in terms of cultivation is America. That is the extent of land India has got. But unfortunately, we have so many people dependent on agriculture that the average size of the farm today is what is called 1.1 hectares. That means it's such a small size that it becomes very difficult to produce profits. You also please remember, because lest we go away with an impression that small farmer is not able to produce. In fact, small farms are more efficient than a large farm. Somebody who owns 100 acres and somebody who owns 1 acre, in our country, a 1 acre farmer is doing a better job than a person owning 100 acres because of personal care. However, the profits are small because profits depend upon the volume of trade. Since the small marginal farmer is producing very little quantity, he is not able to make much profit. That's where the problem in our country is. Okay, so certainly I agree with you. The size matters. In order to negotiate this problem of size, because when the small size is small, when you buy inputs, it becomes costly. When you sell, it becomes costly. So we want to now form the groups of farmers called Farmers Producers Organization. When large number of farmers come together and they keep their ownership, but they practice agriculture as one unit, then they will be able to buy inputs collectively and sell their output collectively. So in economics terms, it's called the scales of economy. So the scales of operation become larger and therefore they can make better profit. And that's one of the new approach that India is going to adopt. We're going to form, to begin with, 10,000 farmer producers organizations in the country. So, and that is only a first the beginning. We want every farmer to get into cooperatives and companies, etc., and become collectively one. That's what it is. So I will tell you one point and you can come to Q&A. I'm sure you have a lot of questions and observations to make and we'll take them forward. I just want to introduce you to a concept called secondary agriculture. What I spoke to you so far is primary agriculture. And all of you know that the entire economic domain is divided into three sets. One is called primary economic activity, secondary economic activity, and tertiary economic activity. Agriculture is considered as the primary economic activity. Industry and manufacturing is considered as the secondary economic activity. And service sector like transport, hoteliering, restaurants, IT, etc. are all considered as service sector. Now, as far as primary economic activity is concerned, where I told you 48% of India's population, that is farmers and landless agricultural labor. Together, 48% of India's population depends upon agriculture. So even if we produce a large volume and large value, the per capita income is always less because too many people are there. Now, this primary production, this primary economic activity, I would like to divide it in two: primary production and secondary production. Now, primary agriculture is what is called biological production on the farm, in the fish pond, in the livestock, dairy sector. In our country, what is happening is, and farmer on an average is engaged for 185 days in a year. Please remember this. Out of 365 days, the farmer is engaged gainfully for 185 days in a year. That means he is mostly engaged during the cropping season, and after that he has no job. Second, the land that we have got, measured in terms of cropping intensity, it is 145%. What is cropping intensity? A unit of land, how many times is it used in a year? If I have 1 acre of land, if I use it 2 times in a year, the cropping intensity for me is 200%. If I use it 3 times, it is 300%. An entrepreneur will always try to increase the cropping intensity. However, the cropping intensity will depend upon whether I have access to water, I have got access to money, I have access to good technology, many other factors. Given the situation in our country, 141 acres of land is being used not 2 times, but a small part of it is being used 2 times and rest of it is not utilized. The point I want you to appreciate is land and labor, both which are very valuable and the primary factors of production in an enterprise, are not being used 365 days in a year. So the common sense says, if we want to create more money for our country, if you want to generate more money for the agricultural families, create an opportunity for the human power to work for 365 days and see how land can be used for 365 days. And that's where it takes us to what is called secondary agriculture. That means the lag that exists today in the human power and the land asset has to be treated, has to be negotiated. How do you do that? So secondary agriculture primarily tries to utilize the resources that are available on the farm and in the neighborhood to add more value and find jobs. How do we do that? Let us take a simple example of, once again, of growing mango. I harvest mangoes and sell it out, or I harvest it, partly I sell, partly I train my own family members to convert them into pickles, and then I sell pickles. What does that happen? After the harvesting season is over, I engage myself and my family in making pickles, bottling them and selling them. So this is a value addition. So now I'm not selling my raw material, but I'm adding value and then selling, because I'm able to capture better value for myself. So likewise, every agriculture produce, there is scope for not just selling the raw materials, but actually adding value. Let's say paddy, for example. I grow paddy, I can just sell paddy, or I dehusk it by having a small huller at my place and produce rice, and then I sell rice. I'm now able to capture value on that. Likewise for pulses. So like this, if we can train our people, we'll be able to add value. Let me give another example. Let us say paddy has one thing, that's the case of a paddy. What are the farmers doing in Punjab and Haryana and West Uttar Pradesh, where paddy is very common? After the harvesting is done, they light fire to their farms. Imagine, so much of pollution is added. More importantly, the husk, which contains a lot of biomass, organic carbon, is all wasted. Instead of that, we help the farmers to collect that paddy straw and take it to a place where it can be enriched as a fodder for the animals, or there is a biomethanation plant where it is converted into a methane gas and gets into energy. This is a value addition. This is what our Prime Minister has been telling, waste to wealth. We now treat paddy straw, cotton stalk, all other kinds of biomass as waste. It is not a waste, it is a value, because Just like a grain containing particular nutrients, a biomass also contains a lot of nutrients, lot of compounds, elements. For example, lignin is there, pectin is there, fat is there, oil is there, protein is there, plastic is there, resin is there. Hundreds of kinds of compounds are there in all of biomass. We only don't know how to use them. We need to bring technology. That is second kind of value addition. There's a third one, which the farms enable us to do. Now I take the paddy straw, I say I use it as substratum to start growing mushroom. Or along with my farm, I have beehive. I can produce honey. Imagine, honey is something which can generate huge employment. I am just giving an example. For example, to illustrate, it is estimated that our country requires 150 million beehive colonies. And today we only have 3.6 million beehive colonies. We still need another 146 million beehive colonies. And if we are able to promote 150 million beehive colonies in our country, we will be able to generate 1.2 crore number of jobs. That means 12 million jobs. Just come to think of it, that agriculture is not just grain, not just fruit, not just vegetable. All its biomass is also a valuable product. We require to train our people. We need to give them capital. We need to organize them into enterprises. We need to tell them what is branding. We need to tell them how to connect with the market. And we are able to generate huge number of jobs. Now, either people can depend on government for charity and tell them, give me every month or every year money and I will survive. That is a welfare approach. Other one is I teach the people by skilling them to become self-entrepreneurs, self-employees. So incomes can come either from charity or from jobs. We must promote incomes that are linked to jobs, gainful jobs. There's a very famous Chinese proverb. China is a bad word now, but let me tell you, that the proverb is very important for us. The Chinese proverb goes, don't give a fish to a man. Teach a man how to fish. If you don't teach him how to go and fish, every day he will come to your doorstep begging for a fish. We need to tell our people, don't beg. You ask for skill, ask for money, ask for technology, ask for organization, and we make our people self-reliant. And that is Atmanirbhar. Only today the Prime Minister has launched the new scheme for generating jobs in the rural areas so that our people become self-reliant. So let me end up here saying that agriculture is primary agriculture and secondary agriculture. We can both utilize it to generate jobs. In the last point, because that's very, very critical, never ever think that agriculture is going to reduce itself in its importance. I personally see that the importance of agriculture is only going to grow in the times to come. Why is that? In 1984, American Secretary of Agriculture, the minister there is called Secretary. The Secretary of Agriculture of the United States called the experts and told them, friends, American farmers have a big problem. What is the problem? They are producing so much. Unfortunately, the countries where we are exporting today have become self-reliant. They don't want any more our commodity. Like India was importing, right? Africa was importing, many countries were importing, but over a period of time, everybody became self-reliant. Why should we buy from America? So the minister told them, imagine our exports have decreased. Simultaneously, technology is improving, productivity is improving, more and more production. Farmers are not able to get any money on their produce. And there is a big problem. So experts told him only one thing, that please stop producing food for the people, produce only as much as is required. Now convert agriculture into producing commodities that will feed our industry. New industries that will depend upon agriculture raw material as a feeder. And I was telling you the various chemical compounds, biochemical compounds and elements these agriculture producers have. Imagine now what kinds of medicines we can produce, what kinds of pharmaceuticals industry can grow, what kind of nutraceutical industry can grow, what kind of composites we can build. There are several things. So far, mankind has depended, particularly since 18th century when the industrial revolution began, on the fossil resources, iron ore, bauxite, copper, manganese, coal, petroleum. Now, all these things can be substituted by agriculture produce, by the produce that is generated in the forests, because they also contain the same thing. Only thing we need a new science, new technology, and then this is sustainable. Unlike the greenhouse gases that all these fossil fuels and fossil resources produce, our agriculture produce will not be generating greenhouse gases in that same order. And this is renewable. Whereas, take a case of coal. If we continue to mine our coal, 1,000 years after, we will not have any coal in our country. Iron ore has got a life of 450 years. What is 450 years? What is 1,000 years? It is not even a speck of dust in the universal space, universal time span. India, the human world is going to live for many, many, many more million of years. We need to have a sustainable method of approach. So agriculture, mind you, can become the new mines for our industry, for our service sector, for the new mankind. So you will have a lot of enterprise that will be all linked to this. We just need to change a mindset. New science, new technology, and new enterprise, and new ways of organizing. So I will stop at this here because I know agriculture is something like an ocean. You don't know where it begins, where it ends. It can go on and on, and it's like a Ramayana, Harikatha. It can go on like that. So I won't take it forward. I will now give the time to you to make your observations and ask questions. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. That was very insightful. And agriculture is Akshay Patra, I guess, for our economy. I feel agriculture is Akshay Patra, and the recent announcements that have been made by our Honorable Minister for Agriculture also has brought the sector to a complete reset. It has reset and it has set the path for agriculture. So would you like to talk about the implementation of those 3 acts, smooth implementation of those 3 acts on the sector of agriculture?
Yeah. See, now there are these 3 acts that we have seen must be seen as a part of the package of reforms that has been introduced in the country for quite a few, for the last few years. One relates to marketing, another relates to contract farming, the third one relates to the Essential Commodities Act.
Yes.
Now, in the domain of marketing, the central law provides for what is called a free trade. A free trade means that the producers and the farmers can sell directly to the trader wherever he or she is based. Now, so far, the agriculture marketing had been restrained by saying that it can be sold only at the APMCs. APMCs have been set up in this country for many decades. More precisely, since 1960s, a large number of APMCs have come up in the country. And APMCs also served a particular purpose. Before APMCs came into existence, there was no organized marketing in India. The farmers used to sell their produce to the village trader who obviously exploited them, and then he made a money on that. Hence, the government brought in what is called APMCs, Agriculture Produce Marketing Cooperative Act, under which an organized marketing place was set up. The farmers were supposed to bring the produce there. Then the auction takes place, the price discovery happens, and then the farmer gets his money. Unfortunately, over a period of time, since the farmer had to sell only at the APMCs, it became a monopoly. That means the traders at the APMCs started exploiting the farmers. If they went to a particular APMC, let's say they went to APMC Singhbhum, at the APMC they found there were only 10 traders. And all these 10 traders used to make a cartel of themselves and did not quote proper prices. Now, what we have done is in 2018, we brought what is called a Model APLMC Act, and shared it to the state government for agriculture marketing is state subject. We have told the state governments to amend their APMC acts. Under the act now, the farmer, if he comes to the APMC, he is subject to the rules. If he doesn't want to come, he need not come. So now he is free to sell outside the APMCs also, and there no rule shall apply to him unless he has come to the APMC. So that is one channel. Now the central trade law that has been now rolled out, the space outside the APMC is what is called the trade zone. In the trade zone, the farmer is free to sell to anybody. Anybody from Delhi or Calcutta can go and buy in Telangana, for example, and vice versa. So now we have two alternate channels for the farmers. One is APMC channel, one is the direct trade channel. So when we have two channels, there's a competition. Wherever the farmer feels he's going to get a better price, he will go there. If you now compare this, for example, with telecom sector, till 1999 we had only BSNL monopoly, and you know what the prices were. When it was privatized and private sector came in, there are so many players, each is trying to serve better, prices have come down. So it is to the advantage of consumers. So likewise, we now hope with two channels competing with each other and also a direct trade in the country, the farmers will stand to benefit. That is the philosophy. Now, associated with this is what is called Liberalization of the Essential Commodities Act. Now, for those of you who may not know EC Act, Essential Commodities Act is a very old act. The present act was brought out in 1955. Under that, there are a series of control orders. There can be control order for agricultural commodities, control order for consumer goods, control order for industrial goods. So control means that the government says you cannot store beyond this quantity. Government says you cannot transport freely from one state to another state. Why did they do this thing? Because we were in an era of shortages. We did not produce enough of cement, enough of steel, enough of food. So there was a tendency on part of some people to hoard it. And then the consumers were getting impacted. The government therefore had kept this power with them. But over the last 50, 60 years, we have now converted our shortage to surpluses. Today we have a lot of surpluses. Food, for example, is surplus. Why will anybody store it? Why will anybody hold it? Hence, there is no necessity to have this particular provision. So now what government has done is said that there shall be no limit on storage, on stocking, on transportation. There shall be a free storage, free transportation. For example, in 2015, just to give an example, I went to a market. I was talking to the traders in Gulbarga of Karnataka. I was asking, why are you not buying from the farmers? They only told one thing, sir, we will buy, but your order says I can't store more than 100 quintals. How can I buy more than 100 quintals? If I buy more than 100 quintals and keep it in my godown, you will come and catch me. Just imagine. On one side, we're asking traders to buy. On another side, we are telling them don't store more than this. Hence, the market reform that government brought out necessarily required a liberalization of the Essential Commodities Act. So today, all food grains, pulses, fruits, vegetables, etc., there is no threshold on that. So these are the three reforms. And alongside this, the Farmer Producers Organization, contract farming. Contract farming means one of the major problems is that after the harvesting is done, because the arrivals come flooding into the market, the supply is more than the demand, the prices crash. The farmers are not able to get good prices. Unfortunately, the farmers don't have that financial capacity to wait for 1 month or 2 months or 3 months when the prices may again go up because they are financially poor. Hence, what under the Contract Act now, the farmers will be able to enter into a contract with a sponsoring company before the production season, and the agreement is, I'm going to give you X quantity of this particular commodity, you must give me this price. Once that agreement is there, even if the market prices fall, the sponsor company has to pay that money to the farmer. That's what is called a contract. So this is to help the farmer to overcome a risk. All right. And the third thing government has done is to what is called negotiable warehouse receipt system. That means when we have a warehouse, that's what is called a godown. If the farmer goes and keeps his commodity after harvesting, he will be entitled to a loan from the bank using his commodity as a collateral. Suppose I keep 100 quintals and the value is 100 rupees, I can get about 75,000 rupees from the bank. I use that 75,000 rupees to meet my immediate requirement. And when the prices go up in the market, I sell and return the money to the bank. So this is called helping the farmer to overcome distress sale. That means he sells when he wants to sell and not when he needs to sell. Okay. So these are all a package of, this constitute a package of reforms. They must all be looked at as one. And how to implement? Yes, ultimately agriculture is in the state. The state governments have to support. Government of India brings out policies, use necessary support financially too. But the state governments must support. So we need to work together. And a large number of NGOs, large number of private sector entrepreneurs, they all must come forward to participate in this to make the success. That's the point I would like to say.
So I think one question from the audience. Sunanda, can you come up and ask your question, please?
Dr. Ashok, there was one question which I've always wanted to understand is what is this whole thing about subsidies? We see agricultural subsidies being given in the richer nations. We see them being given in the poor nations. And I mean, it seems to be that farmers all over the world need some type of subsidy. So could you explain what is this?
Yes. First thing is, let's all remember that subsidies are given to farmers. Subsidies are also given to consumers. Subsidies are also given to industry sector. Subsidies are given to service sector, different kinds. All right. The subsidies are in the nature of a direct subsidy, cash. They could be in form of a tax holiday. They could be in terms of giving land at a lower rate to set up an industry. So all said and done, the governments all over the world, they do give some kind of an incentive to the entrepreneurs to promote industries, for example, or service sector. Now let's come to the farming sector. Now farming sector certainly requires subsidy or a support. Let's call it as support. The word subsidy doesn't look good. Let's call it as support. All right. Why does farming require support compared to other sectors much more? The reason is the riskiest of profession is agriculture. Agriculture is a biological activity. It depends upon nature. It depends upon monsoons. It depends upon pests attack, disease attack, and then fluctuations in market prices. So agriculture, right from sowing up to the marketing, you will find different kinds of risks that are there. Now, let us say monsoon, because in India, for example, mostly we depend on monsoons for our cultivation. If we don't get monsoons in right time, I cannot sow my field. I have sown it, but if I don't get monsoons at what is called a critical stage of crop growth, every crop has got a critical stage. There's a vegetative phase. There's one very critical stage called a grain formation stage. When the grain formation is happening, we must have good moisture. If we don't get water, the good crop growth is there, but there's no good grain. I get a bounty of commodities, but markets have fallen because supply is much more. Hence, the short point is agriculture is highly risky, and therefore it will require support. All said and done. How do we rationalize? That's important. What you're saying is we spend a lot of money on subsidies. Now the government's way is to rationalize it. What do you mean by that? There are two ways of doing it. One way is to promote efficient use. The efficient use, let's say, of fertilizers. Today the farmers blindly apply fertilizers. a farm may require 1 quintal of urea, but they may be adding 1.5 quintals of urea. Why does it happen? They don't know what the farm requires. We human beings go to the lab and test our blood and know what we require. So what is government doing now? Likewise, can we test the soil and tell the farmer that your farm's nutrient status is this? Your farm requires nitrogen but does not require phosphate. Your farm does not require phosphate but requires potassium. So we have introduced what is called a soil health card, where the farmers' soils are tested and the farmer is given an understanding of what the nutrient status of his is, and you add fertilizer accordingly. This is one example. Let us say water. Water is very critical for crops. Now, the common practice of irrigation in our country is what is called flooding. That means farmers just open the canal and let the water flow into his land. It is not necessary because crops don't require that quantum of water. And when you release that water, soil erosion happens. We are now promoting what is called micro irrigation. That means when the water is dropped at the root of the plant. When we use micro irrigation, the usage comes down by 50%. If paddy requires 3,000 liters per kg, then we require only 1,500 liters. So this is how the subsidies will start coming down. But in the long run, the way forward is what is called to shift from price support to income support. That is a new thinking everywhere now.
Okay.
What is the meaning of that? A price support is we give specific subsidy at the production stage and at the post-production stage. For example, we buy the commodities at MSP, that is subsidy. But when we give income support, we say, all right, I have got 3 lakh crore of rupees to be given to the farmers. I will divide this by all the farmers that are in my country. Every farmer gets X amount, and the farmer decides whether he should grow paddy, whether he should grow a cotton, whether he should raise a livestock or fishery. This is more uniform, more clear. Otherwise, today what is happening? Few farmers are getting, many farmers are not getting. So you must have heard of the new debate going on, universal basic income approach, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So over a period of time, I think we will all move towards that universal basic income approach. The advantage of this is that with a click of a mouse, we can transfer that amount to the bank account.
Establishment fees, student.
And all the wastage of the way is reduced, right? Somebody may buy a fertilizer but not use it and sell it to somebody else. We don't know. So we'll move towards that income approach. And the first step government has taken through what's called PM Kisan. Under PM Kisan, government is now giving rupees 6,000 to every farmer in the country in 3 tranches of rupees 2,000. So the farmers decide how to use that 6,000 rupees. So let's hope that over a period of time, we will be able to get more rational. And with the digital India, with the power of Aadhaar number, the mobile technology, and the Jan Dhan accounts, what is called JAM in popular term, Dr. Subramanian must have talked to you when he told you about JAM. Have the power of JAM, we'll be able to transfer the money directly to the bank accounts. And that's how we are going forward. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the wonderful session and simplifying agriculture for us. I'll over to you, Rachna.
Yes, Sirisha, I agree that now we feel that we know much more about agriculture, which we used to know before. And you have put it so simply, Doctor. All the pillars of agriculture, really, it was a very, very insightful session. And about vocal for local, Dr. Dalwai, I would request you to please say a few words on, because we have taken it up very seriously as a movement at Millennium MAMS. And I would like you to appeal to all those who are watching here, and plus we'll be putting this up on our social media so that more and more people, they come and join this movement, and how we can really become Atmanirbhar or self-reliant.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Rachna. It was my pleasure and privilege being with you all this evening. What is very important is that you are promoting the importance of self-reliance. When we talk of self-reliance, let's be very clear, it does not mean building protective walls around our country. No, what the Prime Minister has said is that we shall generate jobs, generate products, generate value, and sell it to outside countries. That means we become the fulcrum for not just India, but for outside India. And today, the youth in particular, and the women in particular, because we have not given them due opportunity for civilizational times to become entrepreneurs, to generate jobs. Today, the importance is and the requirement is for everybody to create jobs. And you are in that particular process. I would say that all of us must support you. Let this grow into a movement where women from all parts of the country come together, because the strength lies in unity. And when you talk of unity, just not in terms of number, it is in terms of knowledge, in terms of skills, in terms of confidence. When people come together, then you're able to bring value to your unity, build value chains and supply chains, not just of agriculture I spoke to you about. It is a value chain and supply chain of knowledge. So you should be able to build across the domains, not just within agriculture. And I would say, for appeal on your behalf to every woman who's there in this country to join, build their own forum like this. We can have a confederation of a series of forums of your kind. And each in different parts of the country is building her own or their own platforms. And today's technology helps us to bring all of you on common platform. There's no necessity for physical transportation. The power of digital technologies that helps us to come together, share our knowledge. And technology is something that is extremely secular. It is neutral. It can be accessed by anybody and everybody. So I must thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, it was a very, very insightful session. And Dr. Dalwai, I would say that it was a very encouraging session for all of us. And we have really understood the importance of agriculture and how it is going to grow multifold. And we as entrepreneurs, we have to go fishing for opportunity.
So let me take another half a minute for you to understand agriculture a little more. We have our report, Doubling Farmers' Income Report, on the website of our ministry. Please note it down.
Yes.
You can access our website, www.agricoop, AGRICOOP.nic.in. Okay?
Okay.
www.agricoop.nic.in. And then you go to the documents window and click on Doubling Farmers' Income. You'll get 14 volumes. So volume 1 to 14 are on different subjects. Volume 9, for example, is on farm-linked secondary agriculture. Okay, and if you want to know about more marketing, etc., volume 3 and 4 will help you. So you go to the index, you will get everything there. And if you read some of those things, I'm sure you'll get more ideas and you can add to those ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the great session, and everybody will agree because they are already writing awesome learning, great session. And we've really it has been very, very insightful. And yes, once again, thank you so much. And I would appeal to everyone here who are already there that yes, we should not forget that agriculture is a green field for promoting entrepreneurship. Thank you so much once again. Thank you, Dr. Dalwai.
Bye-bye. Namaskar to all of you. Bye-bye.